we go to great measures to protect things in life. You do all these things, great measures to go to protect the things that you appreciate. And it seems obvious, right? Because the alternative would just let people take your things. But we don't guard the things that are most valuable to us, really. And that is our potential. And we allow fear to steal that from us each and every day when we feed the fear rather than challenge it. Welcome, welcome, welcome to the Spiritually Hungry Podcast, episode 84. All right, so we decided to take our podcast on the road and do some live episodes. And we were talking about the different topics we wanted to discuss. Many different people were coming over to us at the time saying, we want to talk or we want to hear about fear and uncertainty. And then the world got a little bit crazier with Russia and Ukraine situation, and even after and still in this pandemic, I think it's a very timely and appropriate topic. And in fact, I always think it's a timely topic, which is why I wrote a book about fear, because it is something that connects us all. If you're living and you're breathing, fear does come up and exist in your life.
And I would say, first of all, if you haven't yet read Fear is Not an Option, it is available in Spanish as well for all of our friends here, to all of our listeners all over the world. Please stop the podcast right now and go ahead and purchase your Fear is Not an Option book.
I don't ask him to say these things.
I think it's important. I would only add that kabbalistically we know that there are no coincidences, and that means that everything that happens in the world, certainly pandemics, wars, while there are always reasons and forces behind it, there is also an important lesson, learning, change that each one of us needs to take from it. And the fact that it has become so clear to the world that we are living in such uncertain times is and should be a great impetus for all of us to gain more understanding, consciousness, and tools how we can live, because that's why we're experiencing it, how we can live a life that is with more certainty, that is even amidst of so much chaos, in so much peace.
I'm going to tell you a little secret, but it's not a secret to you. And it's illustrated in the news that we've seen recently, but there are no guarantees in life. And the only guarantee we ever have is having that connection and certainty with the Creator. And I know we're going to unpack it, but that is the bottom line of everything we're going to talk about. And a very wise man named Michael Berg told me once, and often I think this is the message you share overwhelmingly with all of us, is that we need to place total trust in the Creator in all situations. You said, the light of the Creator is involved in this. It's exactly what the Creator has prepared for me, and the light in the situation will transform me. And that is a big thing to actually be able to live. First, it's really hard to comprehend in a way, because we bring up things like disease and losing people too soon, wars, bad things happening to good people. It brings up the questions of time, really. And then if you wrap your head around this idea that that is the only certainty of life and really trusting that process, then the next big question is, well, then how do you live it?
Absolutely.
So I think we'll be answering those questions today. And the truth is, there's no guarantees to a happy, peaceful life. I mean, we go about life thinking that things are going to turn out exactly as we want. We're going to have the amount of kids that we want to have. They're all going to be healthy or as smart as we think they'll be. They'll turn out exactly as we planned. We'll marry the person we planned on marrying. We'll have the job we planned on having. And then those things don't work out. So really, the only certainty we can have is to lean in to the process and make meaning and derive purpose from that and those experiences.
I think that's maybe a very important point, that the thought that we ever really have control, that I, you, any one of us actually has control on what is happening, certainly what will happen, is a silly thought. Unfortunately, we often go through life until something important or chaotic happens with that belief. unless we really remove from our thought that idea that I can know what is going to happen over the next 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, you can't even begin the process of attaining the consciousness necessary and the tools necessary to be able to have certainty in uncertain times.
Well, spending your time in that space of fear, right? We put ourselves outside of ourselves every day in the world, right? The alternative is to do nothing. We reach out to people to become friends. We don't know if that friendship will be reciprocated. You can say the same about romance or love. And then we wake up in the middle of the night, 4 a.m. usually. What if this happens? What if that doesn't happen? And all of those things, we place our thoughts and our energy into the fear, into the uncertainty. And there's a far easier way to really look at what is being offered and say, okay, there's no option not to live. I mean, you can certainly avoid living risk, right? Having a risk-averse existence, but then you also have a joy-averse existence.
Right, I think this maybe is the most important message from tonight. The fact that every one of us needs to know that we, I and you and every single one of us, can live a life whereby even through the chaotic, uncertain times, we can maintain both certainty and peace. And I think that's really what we want to awaken within ourselves this evening, but it begins with the understanding that it's possible. And we have seen people achieve it. We ourselves have experienced that certainty through chaotic situations. But unless you really understand, first, as we said, that life is uncertain as a base reality. Anytime we thought that I know what is going to happen, how this is going to play out, that was a fallacy.
Well, uncertainty basically, by definition, is a lack of clarity in the outcome, but also, I guess, in the process.
Right.
So again, we think that we'll get married and we know how that marriage is going to end up. It's never usually the way we envisioned it. We think that, again, we bring kids in the world and we never imagine they might grow up, God forbid, to be Ted Bundy, right? I mean, you don't go through life with those kinds of certainties, but we expect to have them. And then when things go in a way that is different from what we expected, then the fear kicks in. So they're very close friends, uncertainty and fear. But fear is a sharper edge because it's like having a crystal ball, like, oh, I feel this so completely. It terrifies me. I feel it in every fiber of my being, where uncertainty kind of just feels vague, but they're really closely related.
Right. So the question, of course, is, what is the process by which, because it is a process, and I want to make it clear, this may be the most important work that we do in our lives. You know, sometimes maybe when a person is younger or at a certain point in a person's life, we believe, you know, I can see how things are going to work out. But what is absolutely certain is that every single one of us is going to come to a point in our lives, many of us probably have had many of them, where we just can't make sense of what's going on in our lives and certainly can't make sense of what's going on in the world. So to begin with, I would focus on the work necessary to create, to have the strength of consciousness. And let me be very blunt and say that unless this is a constant focus and work, it's impossible to achieve. If it is something that we focus on and work towards, strong consciousness, then I promise you that we can achieve a life where everybody else is maybe enveloped in chaos and uncertainty, and we feel complete certainty and peace. But to achieve that, there's something, we spoke about this, I think, some months ago in our podcast. We call it mind hygiene, right? That idea that in order for our mind to be strong and certain and at peace through uncertain times, we have to clean our mind. For example, if you are spending your day or too much of your day or your week thinking negative thoughts about other people, thinking even negative thoughts about yourself, those thoughts cloud the mind. You can listen to 1,000 lectures and 1,000 podcasts about certainty in uncertain times. You will never be able to achieve it. Only if you take seriously the work of cleaning the mind, of what you can call mind hygiene, can you even begin the process to think about how, and using the tools to achieving peace when there's chaos around you.
We talk about, in Kabbalah especially, consciousness is everything. But I think we need to stop for a second and say, okay, we can all have consciousness, but very often we have the wrong consciousness, one that is steeped and rooted in fear and doubt and worries and uncertainty. As soon as we feel a pain we didn't have before in our body, or we find a new gray hair, we start to think the worst and we catastrophize. Well, maybe you don't think about the gray hair.
Do I have any gray hair?
Does that affect you? But we go to those places and it doesn't allow for, there's no pause, right? It's just, we see something, effect, effect, effect. And you're not really living a life where you are in the driver's seat, where you are choosing your consciousness and choosing a higher state of perspective.
Right, but absolutely true. But I would say, again, strongly that it starts the step before that. And I ask all of us to ask ourselves the question, today, how many thoughts that are not, let's say, positive, did you have?
Kind or supportive.
Kind, supportive. How many of them were negative or judgmental?
In this day, right?
In this
Just
day.
Today.
And know that unless you are actively protecting your mind, which means, again, limiting, we're not meant to be angels, we're not meant to be perfect, but unless you're actively limiting the amount of negative thoughts that you bring into your mind, forget about having peace and certainty through chaotic times. Impossible.
I think everybody should really pause and count, like how many negative thoughts did we have today that were rooted in worry, fear, doubt, and just plain wrong?
Negativity towards other people, or judgment of other people. I strongly...
So Michael, how many did you have?
That's a good question. Let me count.
I think I probably win for the day.
Yes. But the point is, again, the point is not, again, to be perfect at it, but it is about taking it, maybe the most serious work that we must do. Because without that, nothing we say tonight and no podcast, book, wisdom you ever hear will be able to give you a sense of certainty and peace, which is absolutely possible for every single one of us through those chaotic times. So again, I do think it's a point to take 3 or 5 seconds for every one of us to think about this day. How many negative thoughts did we have about ourselves? How many negative thoughts did we have about other people? How many thoughts of fear, of doubt, of anger did we allow to enter into our mind? You know, throughout the pandemic, even when you walk into this hotel, or when you walk into many stores, they give you the sanitizer
Today was
to clean your hands.
upgraded.
We actually, Monica and I went for a walk with our kids today, and every place we walked into, it's surprised, because in New York and LA, this was a little bit less felt, in London as well, but everybody gives you sanitizer. Everybody was aware, at least through the early stages of the pandemic, you have to keep
No, but here you have to sanitize your shoes.
Oh, we found that. Yeah, what is that, by the way?
But by the way, I want to get one for the house.
Does anybody have a good
cool
explanation?
For the house. I don't know. Maybe.
Well, you have to sanitize your shoes before you walk into a store or a restaurant. Interesting. But the serious point is that...
It's pretty serious, though.
That's serious?
Yeah.
That we are not, none of us, are keeping our mind sanitized enough. And unless we seriously take that work, which means this evening, tomorrow, after you've hear this podcast, be aware of the negative thoughts that are coming into your mind and say, look, I might not like that person, and I might feel free to judge them, but I know one thing. If I allow that thought to enter into my mind is polluted.
But you have to know what's at stake. So you said there was a step before the step I suggested, but I think there's a step before that, and that is, what is at stake here? What will we lose? And if you spend enough time in this state of mind, you basically lose days, and then you lose weeks, and then you lose years, and then the fear gets stronger and stronger, and those things that you imagine the worst case scenario now are really polluting your mind, and you can't even see anything else. So it's a wasted life, because you're spending time either in the past about things you feel badly about that you did, or worried about the future, what might happen or what might never happen. And so what happened to this day? What happens to tomorrow? What happens to the next day? So does anybody come to mind that you've met that they were so rooted in fear of the unknown that they basically stopped their life? They didn't get married, or they didn't have kids, or they didn't do the things that they really desired because they were afraid of the outcome.
Absolutely. I mean, again, we have the merit to meet so many people all over the world.
Tell us a story.
A person that I can think of. Well, I know somebody when it came to children, when they were so afraid of what kind of parent they would be. They came from a broken home and they saw parenting that wasn't exactly right. And therefore they decided that they would either never have children or they wanted to take a long time before they were willing to have children. And again, that one example of so many, we know people, for example, who are worried that they'll never find their soulmate, will never find the person who really fulfills them. And therefore they either delay or unfortunately never come to marry or be with their soulmate. The idea that you said, which is so important, the reason why this is so important is because nothing steals joy and happiness from our lives. Nothing steals time from our lives as much as fear and uncertainty.
You know what comes to mind? I don't know, I always assume people know us, but maybe you don't know everything about us. We have 4 kids, and our second son was born with Down syndrome, which is just a side note for the story. But he graduated from high school a year ago. And I remember at his graduation, it was a room filled with parents who I think were experiencing the same emotions we had. They were moved, there were tears. It was seeing, I think that the way that our children came into the world, everybody in that room was different than most parents experience. There was some fear around it, uncertainty, unknown. The doctors scared us beyond when Josh was born, but he is actually one of the most fearless people I know. And he doesn't worry about anything. And he's certain that he will have all the things he desires, a wife, whatever it's absolutely happening. He's going to join a basketball team. He lives life in this beautiful reality for him. But I remember sitting in that room and I thought, so our births didn't happen the way, everybody in the room, right? The way that we expected. The first few days of welcoming our children were not to be expected, but the overwhelming pride and joy on everybody's face was unanimous. Everybody had that. And then I thought, if you are so worried about outcome, right? Sometimes the things that you don't want are better than the things that you actually wanted. And everybody in that room was full of pride and joy and happiness because what we had wanted or hoped for, what actually came about was much better than that.
Absolutely. And it brings to mind a famous quote that I'm sure many of us have heard before. Marcus Aurelius, who was seen as one of the most benevolent of the rulers at the time, he was also, those of you who know the history, he was a very good friend of a great Kabbalist. His name is Rabbi Nasi. But Marcus Aurelius wrote many words of wisdom. And one of them, and I think this is really one of the tools and ways that we want to develop for ourselves and hopefully for everybody here tonight and our listeners, is this idea that what stands in the way is the way, right? Because, like you said, we think that we can plan and direct our lives for what is best for us. And then when something happens that is outside of either what we thought we desired or what is outside what our plan is, suddenly we're taken aback. This is bad. This might be terrible. Rather than realizing, and I think this is the work of consciousness, and it only comes true to us when it is practiced consistently, that when you realize that what is in the way actually is the way, which means that what is happening that I have not planned, what is happening that is outside of my plan, actually will, either immediately or over time, be what is more better for me than anything that I would have planned myself.
But you need to shift your consciousness, and you need to be all in and jump into the messiness of it, the stickiness of it, the discomfort of it, to be able to find the gem and the pearl that's really there all along.
And you need to practice it.
Of course.
So another question I would ask every one of our listeners, everyone here tonight, when was the last time that something happened that you didn't want to happen, that you didn't plan on happening, from bad to terrible, that you were able to stop and say, even if you didn't, of course, you don't know how, the obstacle in the way is the way. This, even though it's not clear to me how.
Put that on a t-shirt, I like that.
Yes? Okay, there you go. Soon you'll be able to buy it on spirituallyhungry.com.
Somebody write that down.
Right. When was the last time, or ever in your life, have you ever come to a situation like that, again, from bad to terrible, that you said, not only, again, the obstacle in the way is the way, that not only am I not upset, disappointed, angered, going to spend the next 3 days worrying about it, but actually know without knowing that this situation that has entered into my life is actually perfect for me, and actually is what is going to, in some way, make me better, make my life better, make my family better, and practice.
That's basically what surrendering is, and people don't like that word because it sounds like giving up, but it's not. Surrendering is to stop holding on to your narrative and stop fighting the fight you believe you need to fight and leaning into something far greater. It's surrendering to something bigger than you. And it's really a beautiful experience when you do it.
Yeah, I mean, I know in your book, which maybe you'll share with our friends here tonight, there's a story that you tell about surrendering. But before that, I wanted to, again, just underline this point because it's so important. And, you know, for Monica and myself, really, when we share, especially through Spiritually Hungry, our desire, although we enjoy speaking with each other, and I have to say, I'm very happy to have all of you here the evening this us. I was so excited to spend an hour or so talking with Monica. It's one of our date nights during the week. But also, hopefully there's something that we can awaken that creates real inspiration and change.
So I think if you want to cement that idea, when was the last time you understood or experienced the way is the way?
Oh, all the time. All the time. So, like I said, I think it's a gamut, right? So, last night, we were at a wedding and something happened that, you know, I thought was sort of out of what I thought the plan should be. And then afterwards, I was talking to somebody, and I said something very simple, which I believe wholeheartedly, completely, is that if this happened, the one thing we know is that this was absolutely the best thing to happen. That had our plan gone as we had hoped for it to go, it would have been less better than what actually happened. But I do want to make this very clear. Everybody here, every one of our listeners can get to a life where our friends will look at us and say, you're crazy. This is happening in your life, or this is happening in the world, and you're at peace, and you're actually happy about it. It doesn't make any sense. But if you practice. This is a story I often share, but it's one of my favorites. And this number of years ago, we were traveling from LA to New York on a flight. And I sat in my seat, and some other passengers were coming on board. And one of them was putting their luggage in the overhead compartment right over my head. And they had a big venti, I think it's called. Starbucks. But one of those sticky ones, right?
Sugary.
One of those sticky, sugary. And it fell out of their hands, and the cup opened, and it spilled all over me. So the first thought I had was, oh my God, for the next 6 hours, I'm going to be sitting in sticky clothing.
And my thought was, I'm so happy it wasn't me.
But my second thought was, even though I don't understand why, I have complete certainty that this is the perfect thing for me.
You did. You recovered very quickly.
And therefore, the next 6 hours, even though one could say, what are you sitting there in your sticky clothes? You must be uncomfortable. I can honestly say that the 6 hours were actually better for me because they actually had purpose. Even though I don't understand exactly why it was necessary for my development, for my growth, to sit 6 hours in sticky clothes, I had clarity and certainty that that was the case. And therefore, those 6 hours for me were not only better than had my clothes been unsoaked in sticky Starbucks coffee, but they were actually better and more purposeful. And therefore, I cannot underline this or stress this enough. You have to practice this all the time. Which means, again, you're stuck in traffic, somebody said an unkind word to you, something really bad happened. You can repeat those words in your mind. I might not understand exactly why this is for my best, but I have certainty that it is. And if you do that enough, that strength of mind becomes your reality. And then people will be looking at you and saying, this is happening in your business, this is happening in your family, and you're so at peace, and you're so happy. How can that be? Yeah, because I practiced for a week, for a month, for a year, for 5 years, for 20 years. And let me say this also. Every one of us is going to come, maybe, as I said, you will come to a point in your life, to a situation that is overwhelming. And unless you practice this strength of mind, this consciousness for 5 years prior, 10 years prior, 20 years prior, you will be overwhelmed. You will not know what to do. You'll be filled with fear and with confusion. But if you practice starting today, for the next day, month, year, 5 years, I promise you, you will get to those situations, and people around you will not understand how, but you will be at peace, and you will be fulfilled, and you will be happier through that process than not.
Well, in Secrets of the Zohar,
Sorry, but we promised for you to share a story of your surrender.
I didn't promise. You
I
suggested.
promised. I
didn't say
suggested.
anything like that. What are you talking about? I have other intentions. I'll share it if you want me to later.
Okay. I'll remind you. Let me make a note. 1 second.
Or you could just read the book.
Once again, if you haven't yet read Fear is Not an Option, please make sure.
It's a chapter on surrender. So Secrets of the Zohar, you wrote, from our birth until the day we leave this world, fear is a constant challenge in our lives. So I look at it kind of like, if we understand there is a healthy place for all of our negative emotions, and they're there to wake us up and to shift and to change and to see the way we're living in a different way, to challenge ourselves. So it's not that we want that fear is horrible. We need to eradicate it, but we also need to understand it, and we need to let go of it. So I will say this, in my book, I identify 3 different types of fear, because I think this is a really powerful way to navigate fear. So there's 3 types. There's healthy, real, and illogical. Healthy is as it sounds. It's set up for your survival and your protection. It's there to keep us safe. Like, don't put your hand over an open flame. It could burn a person. Don't go too close to an edge of the cliff because you could fall. It's all of those things that keep us safe. And intuition is a part of that as well. It reminds me of this story because people often confuse fear and intuition. How do you know if, for instance, you go into you park your car in a lot underground every day, and you fear every day that something's going to happen. There will be somebody there that will cause harm or danger. But if you have that thought every day, chances are it's not intuition, because you have the thought every single day, right? It's something that you are just afraid of. Intuition would be you never have that thought, and then one day you have the thought. I would say take it seriously. And you remember that actor, John Larroquette from, what was it, Night Court.
I don't know if anybody here, I think that's not something.
It's older. Anyway, he's an actor.
It was actually one of my, for those American listeners, that was one of my favorite shows.
I never watched it, but I liked the story about him. So it got my attention because he's from New Orleans like me, and he had a childhood friend that they nicknamed Hannibal. I don't really know why, but it sounds like another interesting story. And they had a lot in common. They both suffered from alcoholism. They had a very turbulent childhood. And so they bonded in that way. And for whatever reason, one day he kept thinking, or 1 week, about his friend. And his friend never answered the phone, so he couldn't call him. So to actually check on him, he had to fly to New Orleans to go and see what was going on. And he tried to ring the doorbell. He couldn't get in. He found another way into the building. And he goes to the door, and he sees this king cake, which is a famous cake during Mardi Gras. I'm giving you like a history in my childhood that made me very happy, but it was sitting outside the door for 2 weeks. So then he got really worried, and he broke the door in, and his friend had died 2 weeks earlier. So that is that intuition, right? Of course, he was worried, he was fearful, but there is a place for that. So that is healthy fear. And there's a way to learn to practice your intuition, which maybe we'll go into later. The other one is real fear, and that's based in reality. It's fear of disease, aging, death, losing your loved ones. These are real fears we have in life, right? But even with that can be transformed to be a motivator for growth. So for instance, if we take the idea of losing loved ones, then make sure the time you spend with the people you love is purposeful, is fun, is engaging, and then you're saying I love you, you're not fighting and picking, and you're certainly not ruminating that thought over and over again of the day will come where I won't have them. You really experience them fully. So that also can be a good fear. Then there's illogical fear, and this is where most of our fears stem from. It's fear of elevators and snakes and rejection, flying, public speaking. It's all of those things that keep us small, that keep us from living our dreams, that keep us paralyzed and in a state of constant worry and doubt. And that is what really stops us from living the life we're meant to live. Because we take all of those illogical fears seriously, and we think about the what ifs, and if this happens and that happens, and we just stay in this little box where we never make people too upset, or we never make too much noise, or we never go after the things that we want to do because we're worried about the outcome. And that is the fear that needs to be eradicated.
Yeah, as you were saying that, it reminded me of a story, but you tell much better than I, so once again, I'll ask you.
Is it another story about me?
Yes, no, that's not about you. A number of years ago, we were flying with our friends in a small plane from LA to Las Vegas. And as we were, those of you who've ever flown that route, you know, in Las Vegas, sometimes it's very, very windy. So Monica, complete the story.
So she's a very fun friend, but she was very uncomfortable with flying, and we are not, and her husband was not. But there was a lot of turbulence. Like, we're going up and down, and she starts to say, I don't want to effing die. She's freaking out, screaming. I'm like, nobody wants to die. You need to stop that right now. But she was full on in the throes of the illogical fear, because the chances of dying other ways are much greater than the ones we worry about.
Which brings us to another important idea, that the way we view our lives, the spiritual way, the kabbalistic way to view our lives, is that whoever I am today is meant to be even greater, even better, even more fulfilled. That a constant state of growth and change is necessary. If you don't live your life in that way, then the next thing I'm going to say is going to be even more difficult. But I want all of our friends, all of our listeners, everybody here to think about that. That if we view our lives as a process of growth and change, that who I am today, speaking for myself, I want to be a different person tomorrow. I want to be a more transformed, changed, elevated version of myself next week. Then that leads us to the understanding of why situations occur that were not in my plan. Because every single one of those are perfectly created so that I can bring forth, make manifest the greater strength, greater version of myself. Why did I have to sit for 6 hours in sticky clothes? Because
wanted to entertain me.
also, but also because that process, even though I can't understand the specifics of it, made me a better person, elevated me, transformed me. And when you view life in that way, that whoever I am today, I am meant to be a different version tomorrow and the next day. That is one of the most powerful ways to be able to embrace all the unthought, all the unplanned aspects that come into our lives. Understanding that they are perfect for me, that they were created in such a way to bring out of me. Each one of us has much greater power, happiness, wisdom than we're currently manifesting. No matter what you're doing, and hopefully many of us are doing very important and great things with our lives. But I know, and we should all know clearly, that there is so much more within me. And therefore, I have to always be growing and changing. But, and this is the ancient Hebrew word, nisayon, which means challenges or tests, are necessary. And they have a very clear and perfect purpose. Going through this is how I transform, is how I elevate, is how I manifest from me the greater version of myself. And therefore, in the ancient Hebrew, it's not coincidental that the word for elevation, or nes, is the same word for nisayon, challenges and tests. And if you live your life in that way, that is how you, with joy and maybe even greater happiness, embrace, call it surrender, but embrace those unplanned situations. Because I know that the reason why this is coming into my life is perfectly, even that is perfectly set up, I'm thinking about our listeners who didn't know what just happened, but okay. Even that.
Well, they can imagine.
Yes, something terrible just happened. Even that is perfectly prepared to be able to bring out of myself a better version of myself.
Well, think about the story we just told about our friend, right, on the airplane. So you can either panic full on in that moment. You can say, okay, here's an opportunity for me to flex that muscle. Of course, you have to be in the game, right? You have to realize that that's something you want to flex and you want to build. But it's those moments each and every day. Or, you come, let's say you come to Mexico and the elevation's giving you a headache and the pollution and whatever else. Okay, what's the opportunity? What can I actually, do I take it as a sign as I wasn't meant to come, or I shouldn't be here, or it's something bad is about to happen? Or is it an opportunity to flex that muscle? And that really has to be the way that you kind of navigate life. Because again, fear will be along for the journey. It's part of what is necessary for us to reach our evolved self.
Absolutely. And if I can,
you may.
There's a deeper concept here, and I hope sometimes Monica helps me unpack. Challenges is a good word too, as we just said. Some of the deeper concepts that I share, but this is so important, and I was inspired by it today as I was studying. The unknown, or as the ancient Kabbalists call the Ein, the unknown, has more light, more blessings than what is known, than what is called the Yesh, what exists. So that means that life must be filled. You actually want it to be filled with the unknown, because there's so much more in the unknown than what is in what is. And again, I hope this is understandable, but what that means is that every time something happens, even if it's fearful, even again, it's a difficult challenge that you have to deal with, remind yourself, and this has to become our mantra. In the unknown, there is more light and blessings and fulfillment than in the known. And therefore, when the unknown occurs, what are all of our fears? Most of our fears, 90%, 99% of our fears, not from what is here, what it is, but the unknown. We are born with the fear of the unknown. But if you practice this thought, the unknown is greater, has more blessings for me than the known, then I don't want to know. I'm actually happier when my plan doesn't go to plan, when the situation that comes into my life is completely against, or again, even challenging, or even fear awakening. Because I know that in that unknown, there is more light, there is more blessings than any of the yesh, any of the known that I already have.
Well, that takes us, I think the story of Josh's graduation is a perfect example. I think that really explains the feeling that I had that day. Everybody in that room really embraced the unknown. Nobody knew how their child, we never do, right? But we're under the illusion that we know how our children will turn out, right?
Can I challenge you?
I'd love to be challenged.
So we don't know what the process was for all of those families. And let's talk about it because I think it's so important. So Josh was born 20 years ago. And from that moment, we had two options. We could have listened to the doctors and all the negative things that they said and all the things that he won't do. So we could have lived 20 years in fear, 20 years in doubt, 20 years of unknown that leads to fear. Rather, we chose a different path.
Do you remember, though, at first I was like, what's going to happen when he hits puberty and what's going to happen at this age? And then I said, I don't even know. I mean, let's look at today. And then tomorrow, let's look at tomorrow. Because you can put yourself in a whole spiral of doubt.
But unfortunately, we know people who went through that process, and it's possible people in that room in the graduation were families that started from day one with fear of the unknown and lived 20 years in fear, only to realize, hopefully 20 years later, it is much better than we thought.
Yes.
And that's why it goes back to
that's not a challenge. I agree with you.
Yes, yes. No, but what I'm saying was those families in the room, we don't know if their life for the past 20 years was filled with doubt and uncertainty.
I don't know. And I'm sure that they probably had a harder path because we had a spiritual foundation to fall on. But what awakened me that day is that everybody had the same look on their face that we had. They were tears of joy and pride. And I don't know what took them to get there, but that was the experience. It was not, nobody was suffering in that room.
Absolutely. Yeah, and to the point that, like you said earlier, hopefully part of the awakening from this evening is that I will not allow fear of the unknown to steal a moment of joy from the now. Unfortunately, too many of us do it too often. And again, none of us are perfect, and none of us are meant to be perfect, but the understanding that through practice, through wisdom, we can actually live a life that is more not known, because none of us will ever get to known. The future is always going to be unknown, but the embracing and the joy of the unknown. And like I said before, I think because we do see this, and there's a story, again, that Monica often shares. We were here in Mexico probably over 25 years ago. We were actually in Acapulco, and there was a big earthquake. We were staying at a hotel with the Rav, with my father.
You're on the 20th floor.
20th floor. And it was a big earthquake. I forget exactly how big, but it was a big earthquake. And I'm sure everybody in this room knows, but maybe our listeners, the hotel was swaying. Everybody in the hotel ran down to the outside. And the Rav, my father,
was eating a steak
was eating dinner. And again, he had lived his life practicing everything we spoke about this evening. And after everybody ran outside and everybody came back, maybe a half hour.
By the way, but when I say he's eating a steak very slowly, the Rav was a slow eater, but we're swaying. We stayed with the Rav, eating like it's like nothing's happening. I mean, really, like nothing was happening outside of enjoying dinner.
And therefore, what I'm so excited to share this evening is the fact that imagine what your life will be like if through an earthquake, either actual or in our lives, you are able to maintain that certainty. And we've seen it, it's possible. We've acted, I'm sure many of us in times have acted in this way. We too often allow the theft of our moments of our days through fear, and there's another way, and that's the understanding. There's another way.
So you brought up perfectionism, and I just want to bring up 3 points of things that we don't recognize as fear, but they are rooted in fear. So this is where it hides. The first is perfectionism. The need to be perfect is a mask we wear to protect ourselves from criticism and rejection. So we use these places that are actually motivated by fear, right? But we don't recognize it. So perfection is very much fear-based. The other is settling. Settling for less than you deserve is a powerful indicator. You're letting your need for certainty, but not as we understand certainty, the need for security, for comfort.
For knowing the future.
For knowing to run your life. If you don't have an extraordinary, passionate relationship and a job you absolutely love, you're living in fear. And procrastination, always putting your goals off until tomorrow or when I have more time, and a classic delay tactic of those who are living in fear. I used to be a big procrastinator until the day I realized that people who procrastinate are just worried about they're unsure of the outcome, so then they actually delay finding out what that would be.
By the way, I'm sure many of our listeners, our friends here know, in a few moments we'll be open to questions, and I really hope that part of our joy in traveling throughout the world and sharing the Spiritually Hungry podcast is both hearing and interacting with our friends.
Well, I do want to share one other tool, because I mean, we talked about a lot of ideas, but I want to just ground it a little bit so people can actualize what we're discussing. And this inspired me. It's actually something from Theta Healing. But it's a powerful question. So when we are facing fear, we can ask ourselves, what is the worst thing that can happen? Right? Because what happens, again, when the turbulence in the plane, oh my God, it's going to crash and die. We're going to die. But what's really the fear? Like, what's the bottom line of that? So here's one example. If you ask a person, what is your greatest fear? And they answer, their fear is being poor, let's say. So what will happen if you're poor? I'll be on the street. And what if you're on the street? I'll suffer and die. And what if you suffer and die? I'll become nothing. So the fear wasn't really about being poor, it was about being nothing. And in this case, the work would then be to focus on understanding the infinite nature of your soul and building a connection with your soul versus working on fears around security, right? So, and that's why it's important to unpack fear. It's important to know yourself, to be emotionally intelligent. So the things we think we fear are not really what we fear. There's something else that's underlying. And when you recognize it, when you name the fear, it's easier to transform it. I do have a conclusion, but...
Yeah, I was going to say, no, one more. It's interesting. We have a friend who, in this moment, is going through different challenges in his business. And I had this conversation with him. So this is somebody who, regardless of how this one, he has a few businesses, how this one business goes, he does not have to worry, really, about his life. And I had this conversation, what are you worried about? And he's up late at night and worried and taking care of things and literally stealing months of joy. And I said, let's talk about this logically. Let's assume the worst thing happens and this business goes out of business and you lose all the money that you invested. Are you or your family are going to have to worry about what you're going to eat, where you're going to live, what you're going to do? He said, absolutely not. I said, so how silly would it be? Yes, of course it's important to find a way to fix the business, find a way to make it work. Amazing. But the fear?
That's a story. It's the fear of being nothing.
Exactly. And we came to the point that it wasn't about the business, and it wasn't about the money. It was actually about the idea of how can I fail? How could I have failed? And so often in life, that's the reality. Where if we follow the fear thought all the way through, if this okay, what's the worst? What's the worst? What's the real reason? We'll find that we're allowing what I would say ultimately silly reasons that are born from that fear to steal time from our lives.
So let's wrap it up in a nutshell, right? We go to great measures to protect things in life, right? When you leave your house, you turn on the alarm and lock the doors. When you get in the car and you get out of it, you put the alarm on. If you ride a bike, you secure it to a rack. You put your money in the bank, you put your jewelry in the safes. You do all these things, great measures to go to protect the things that you appreciate. And it seems obvious, right? Because the alternative would just let people take your things. But we don't guard the things that are most valuable to us, really. And that is our potential. And we allow fear to steal that from us each and every day when we feed the fear rather than challenge it.
Absolutely. And if I would say, if I can leave all of you maybe with 4 thoughts that we spoke about this evening. First, that a life, I would say without any type of fear, but at least with much less fear than any of us experience now, is absolutely not only possible, but what we're meant to achieve. The only way to get there is by protecting our consciousness, by protecting our mind, not allowing our mind, as we do all the time, to be polluted by negative thoughts. That's the prerequisite of achieving a life of certainty through any type of uncertainty that comes into our lives. Third, the understanding that the reason why things do not go as planned is only one. Why did this happen? Why did this challenge occur? Why did this problem happen in my business? Why did this problem happen in my life, in my family, chas v'shalom? Is because this situation is meant to change me, to elevate me in such a way that my greater potential becomes revealed. And it's perfect for that. And then fourth, practice, practice, practice. You get stuck in traffic, there's a small problem. Only if you are practicing this thought that the obstacle is the way, as Marcus Aurelius said, then you'll find in a year, in 5 years, then maybe even bigger challenges happen. People will be looking at you saying, how? How are you so happy? How are you so at peace with all this happening? I've practiced for 5 years. I've practiced for 20 years. That's how. So, as we often say, we hope that our friends here tonight, here in Mexico City, all of our listeners all over the world, that we have inspired. And as I said, for me, the reason this topic is so important, because maybe this is the most important work that we must be doing every day of our lives, because the benefit of it is so great. But I hope you enjoyed, our friends here enjoyed our time here, our sharing of some inspiration and wisdom, as much as Monica and I enjoyed sharing it. Maybe more importantly, that it actually creates a change in your life. So thank you again to all of our friends here. We really enjoyed this time with you, and we hope one of many more now that the world is a little bit more open. But thank you all for coming, and I hope that in our sharing this evening, there is something that you can take that creates a positive change, that creates a positive inspiration in your life. Thank you.
Stay spiritually hungry.